Abarth 500e. It's a fun, charming little thing. I actually preferred it significantly dynamically to any other petrol Abarth that I'd driven. This one actually felt like it had...
Yeah, I mean, that's because actually the underlying proposition, the platform it's on, if you just drive a normal electric Fiat 500, it's really good.
Sure.
Whereas the old Fiat 500, I'm sorry for all the millions of people who have them, and they look nice, but they just weren't very good cars in terms of, their ride was shocking. They didn't handle. They didn't steer.
Yeah.
They just weren't. And and you can put as many Abarth stickers on it, give them as much power. You're just not going to get around that. I never drove one. I never drove one I liked.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably fair. But this thing, it is a fun little thing. Dynamically much better than other Abarths I've had a go in. I think it looks super cool as well. It's got a few problems. Let's be honest about this. First of all,
one particular one, which I didn't really come across, but you did big time.
Yeah. So the first issue is that it's not cheap, and this is a fairly common thread through EVs at the moment, isn't it? It's 38 grand. 38 grand for a little electric car.
Goodness me. I mean, if you think about, when they stopped selling it, what you'd have paid for a Fiesta ST, it would have been, I don't know, 15,000, 16,000 pounds less than that.
Yeah.
It would have been early 20s, wouldn't it?
And way more fun to drive.
Way more fun to drive. Yeah, and you didn't have to park it for however many hours every time you ran out of I mean, it's a really, the thing is electric cars, particularly electric cars like that, they're all what I call qualification cars. You always have to qualify what you're saying. You can say this is a really, really good car for an EV, for a small electric EV. You never had to qualify a Fiesta ST. You just said this is a fantastic car. Full stop.
Well, let's talk about some of the qualifications. With me on board, it's a 1,500 kilogram car.
Yeah.
We know EVs are heavy. We know they're going to get lighter. The technology will improve. Perhaps there'll be a quantum leap in battery tech at some point. The thing about the Abarth is it's a little electric car. It doesn't have a huge battery. I think 42 kilowatt hours or something, maybe a bit bigger. And so inevitably the range is limited. They say it'll do 158 miles, WLTP. Of course, when it's cold, that's much less.
When you're driving it?
The other issue is, if it was a pure city car, if it's a Fiat 500e, and it really does just live in the city, and maybe sometimes you go along a motorway where there is a good charge network, that kind of range is okay. But a sporting EV, a hot hatch, the idea of that, surely, certainly to me, is that you get out of the city, you get away from the main arterial routes, you get into the hills, into more remote parts, drive a car like that the way it should be driven on roads like that, and you're not going very far before you have to go and find a charge point somewhere. You are not going very far. And that was actually a bigger problem for me in terms of going out for a fun drive than the lack of sound, than the lack of a manual gearbox or any of that stuff. It was range anxiety.
The problem is it's always in the back of your head. It would just slightly take the edge off my enjoyment of the day, knowing that was just waiting for me.
I think I feel a bit sunnier, a bit rosier, a bit more optimistic about all this stuff than you do. I'd actually, and I suspect you would as well, I'd love to have a little EV at home, purely for coming into town, for knocking around the city. I'd really enjoy that. I had to bring the M2 into Bristol for a hospital appointment for my daughter, and parking around the Children's Hospital is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And we were wedged into a tiny space.
Yeah.
It's a 2-door car. So it's very difficult to open the door and get her in and out. And I just thought, if I had a little tiny electric car right now, this would be fantastic.
Yeah.
That for me is what they are for. That's what they're good at.
And I live, so we're in a studio in Bristol at the moment, and I live about 30 miles away. Most of which is either motorway or city drive. I have no interest in driving anything interesting on a route like that. If I had a little Renault Zoe or something like that, so you just nip in, nip out, park it anywhere, be completely unobtrusive, perfect. But the problem is that we mustn't go on about it because it's what we always say. It therefore has to be a second car, and you have to have off-street parking so you can charge it at home, and therefore it means they're not for everyone. They're not these great democratizing machines that some people seem to think that they are.
The issue for me is that when you need them to do something else, something other than just zip around the city, you are then limited. But it's more of an issue with something that is trying to be a bit sporty. because, as I say, it should be driven in a certain way. It should be driven on a certain road. So it was an eye-opening experience for me. But when we had lots of charge and I was on a great road, I enjoyed it a lot.